Today we are going to learn how to add full CRUD, so create, read, update and delete functionality to our Firebase project with React. In the last video we created this application, which is a database fetch school directory. To prepare this video I added these two buttons and additional functionality to show you how to implement the CRUD functionality for Firebase and React. So let's get started. If you did not see part 1, then you might want to check it out to see how to set up a React Firebase application. And I also covered there how to get the data, so I won't cover this in this video. In this video, we will only cover how to add, update and delete the objects in our app. I refactored the app.js a little bit so we can set a different option here. So if you want to use just the get function and not the onSnapshot function, we will return only the get Firebase component. Otherwise, we will return the snapshot Firebase component. They're pretty much the same, only the functionality in the functions here are different than the functionality in the functions here, but we will go through them in this video. So as I said in the first video, the default way to look at Firestore from Firebase is to use the onSnapshot method, which is kind of like a real-time database. So we set get to false, so we're only gonna render the snapshot Firebase component, which is this one. Just to give you a little overview, we bring in here whatever we need. We have our different states with the React hooks. We bring in our Firebase Firestore collection schools. This is the same thing we did in video 1. We have the get schools function. We call that in a use effect. Then this is new. We have the add school function, the delete school function, and the edit school function. And I will go through them here so you understand what's actually happening and you can implement that in your own code. Here in our return of our React function component, we have an input, a text area, and a button. The button references the add school method and supplies an object with the title that is set here. So set title. Then the description, which is set here in the set description method, and the ID, which comes from a package called UUID version 4, which we imported up here. If you come from video 1, you might want to implement that too. So what you have to do is install UUID on your terminal and you will have the same functionality. What actually happens here on the UUID, this will generate a random ID, and that's pretty much all that is. So we will get an object with title, description, and the ID. And if you go to our application and put something in, school 1, and submit that, we will see, first of all, it renders it out in the application. And secondly, it was created here in our Firestore database. And you can see this is the ID that has been automatically generated with the package UUID. So what actually happened here? Let's go back to VS Code. So the add school takes in the parameter of the object with the title, description, and ID I talked before, and creates a new document with the doc method, which takes in as a parameter the ID. So what actually happens there, if you go back to our Firestore, this ID will be created because we put in here the ID as a parameter of our doc method. What we could also do though is comment that out and use just doc as the method without putting the ID in as a parameter. So what happens then? Let's go to our app. Submit that. Then we will see everything works fine, but the difference is that if you don't put in the ID as a parameter, Firestore automatically generates an ID. The not so good thing about that is that the ID we set in our application doesn't match the document ID here. And we could do that and work around in our code with that if we would fetch a document after it has been created and match it with the ID and all kinds of stuff. But how we work with React, it's most probably the best if we set the ID beforehand like that, because this kind of way doesn't really have any downside to it. So I highly suggest to use this method. So then the document has been created and we append the set method to it, where we put in as a parameter the new school object, which again is the object with the title, description, and ID. So that means that in this document, this object will be created. And then the last thing we do is append a catch method to it if we have an error, and then the error will be logged out to the console. And that's already it. So you see how easy it is to work with Firestore from Firebase. So what about the delete function? The delete function is similarly easy. So we reference the doc with our school ID. And this is the reason why we want to have the same ID in the document as also in the object of the item itself. Because then here we can easily reference it from our object. So we reference the doc with the school ID, and then just append the delete method to it, and then at the end again have a catch method for the error where we console log the error to the console, and that's pretty much it. So let's try that out. So we want to delete school 4, and that works. And because we work with the onSnapshot method, we don't have to do anything else to it here. So append some custom method where we will update the UI. This works automatically with Firebase. Afterwards, when we work with get Firebase, we will have to do that, but we will see that later in the video. And again, the edit function similarly easy. We just reference the doc and append the update method to it, and again append the catch method for any errors. We could also do it with set, but I prefer the update method and it's more descriptive as well, so I wouldn't even worry about the set method to update your object. So what actually happens here, if you go down here, we have a button, so that's a delete button on click where we add the school object as a parameter before, but we will focus on the edit school where we again have the parameter as an object with the title, which references the school title, then the description, and then the ID. This is very important, that is the same ID like the school ID. So what actually happens here? So here we have all the schools and we map through the schools and get each school here. So let me show you how that looks like on the UI. So this is the title, the description, and the buttons. And then if you want to edit our object, what we want to do is the title is set to school title. So no matter what we put in here, this will stay the same. But as a description, we will use this one. So whatever we put in this text field, this will change down here because we set it equal to description. And of course, the ID, this is what I said, is very important, stays the same also, because we reference it from school ID, which comes from up here. So what happens if we edit here, edit school description. So what will happen is that this will be put in here and this will stay the same because, as I said before, we don't change that, we just reference the school.title again. So if you click here, we can see that only this changed. Of course, this is not really a functionality you most probably want to have on any app you create, but it's just for this tutorial so we can use the edit function here. So again, we get that as a parameter. So let's go up here. And as we see, we just take in updated school as parameter here. We reference the doc with that ID and then update our object we get in as a parameter. And that's all pretty much it. So we can even see here in the database, the description has changed. And that's how easy it is to add CRUD functionality to your application with Firestore. So let's go to app.js and set this to true, so I can show you how to add CRUD functionality if you just want to use the get function. So let's add that to true, and we can see our application has changed to the get component. So let's go here and open up the get component, which is exactly the same in regards to what we render out. We have our submit button, our text input area, our input area. We render the same div with the school, the title, the description. We have both the delete button and the edit button, and the arguments that we'll put in as parameters are exactly the same. But things work a little bit differently here. So we have our getSchool function, which is the .get method, and not the snapshot method we had in our snapshot example. So this is the big difference. So let's go here. We have the same, we use that in useEffect, we call the getSchools method. And then we have different addSchool functions. So you can see here, it's exactly the same. So the doc, we reference the doc with the ID. We set the new school, so the object as a parameter. But then what we have to do, so let's comment that out for now and see what happens if you want to add a school with the get method. So let's go to our UI and add school 5, new school, and submit that. And we can see nothing happens. In the backend, actually, it updated it. So we have our school 5 with our description and our ID. But here on the UI, nothing changed. So what we have to do is refresh it and then it works. But of course, this is not what we want to happen on our app. So let's comment that out again. So what we have to do here is append a .then method, which returns an arrow function where we have to manually set schools with this function. So what we do here is we take in previous, so the previous state of this set schools, which of course references the schools. So this is a React hook. If you don't know React hooks, you most probably want to look it up. But down here, we take the previous state, we spread that out in our array, and we add the new school object here. So that means we get all the states beforehand and our new school in an array, and this will be set to schools, which then will be rendered on the UI. So let's save that and go to our app. And then if we add school 6, put in the description, now we see it works. We could see now that updating the UI was slower than with the onSnapshot method. So this is another advantage of working with the onSnapshot method compared to the get method for Firestore. But yes, that's how it works. Of course, we append the catch method again for the errors. So let's go to the delete method. It's the same thing. We reference a doc with the school ID with the delete method. But again, then we have to append then with an arrow function and then set the schools to a method. We could use different methods, but what I did here was calling the filter method to the previous state and then reference every element that the ID is not the school ID. So what's going to happen here, we return every element that has an ID which is not the school ID. So at the end of the day, we delete the element that has a school ID. And this is a very popular way to delete elements in your React state. And then we have the catch function again, and that's pretty much it. So let's try that out. We delete one of the schools, and we could see it took a little bit more time than with the onSnapshot method, but at the end of the day, the functionality is the same. Then the edit function is a little bit more complicated. Of course, this is the exact same as we had with the onSnapshot function. Then we append the then method. We set the schools to the previous schools and we map over the elements. And if the element is not equal to the updated school ID, we just return the elements, because these will be the elements that we are not interested in, so that are not edited. And then if the element ID matches the updated school ID, we just return the updated school, which is the object we take in as a parameter here, which comes from here. So again, the same functionality. Let's try that out. Let's put something in here because we already saw before, it doesn't matter, and put in description new, edit that, and we can see it will be updated here and of course in the database. Then of course we append the catch method at the end of it for our error checking. And that's pretty much it. So that's how we covered editing, deleting, and adding an object with either the snapshot method of doing things in Firestore or with the get method for doing things in the Firestore. All right, this was already it. Don't forget, I put the GitHub repo to this project in the link in the description down below. I hope this video helped. If you want to see more videos like that, don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, please leave me a like. I really appreciate it. See you in the next video.